Can these people sit down first? Can you let these people sit down first? Good morning, and welcome to First Unitarian Church of Wilmington this morning. All those of you here in the sanctuary, and to those of you who are joining us online from whatever beautiful surroundings you're in. My name is Rebecca Fisher, and I'm delighted to welcome you in my role as worship associate today. And Mom, I can't wave back to you there in the back. It's not protocol. Welcome to you all. No matter the hue of your skin, the origin of your ethnicity, welcome whomever you love and wherever you are on your spiritual journey. You are welcome here. If you are new to First Unitarian, I invite you to check out our website, firstuuwilm, all smushed together, .org, firstuuwilm.org, to learn more about us and to sign up for our email newsletter. Welcome to our service for this first Juneteenth national holiday and this annual Father's Day, and to our service where Reverend Larry will be reflecting on some of Henry David Thoreau's ideas and how he beckons us to be awake to the world around us. And now let us prepare our hearts and minds for worship.
Good morning. Before I read our opening words this morning, I want to make just a few announcements. One is I want to acknowledge Rebecca for filling in kind of at the last minute as a worship associate today. But she seems like such a pro that you would have not even known that is the case. And I want to make sure I mention to you that next Sunday we are going to be joining thousands of Unitarian Universalists from around the country, well, let's just say around the world, who are going to watch our service online, which means two things. One is we will not be gathering in this sanctuary. And our service, because the General Assembly is in Portland, Oregon, is going to be online starting at 12:30 on Sunday, next Sunday. You can watch it anytime afterwards, I think, but the link will be available for you then. Did you get that? Give me some reassurance that you've got that. So don't show up here. Watch the service next Sunday online. And it's very inspiring to be gathered in that way with Unitarian Universalists from around the country. Now, just a small note. This is my last Sunday in the pulpit until August. I had to make sure I didn't pause too long in there. Until August. So I will be away after going to the General Assembly. I'll be here at the last part of June, but then I won't be here during the month of July. It's been a great year. It's been an exhilarating and exhausting year. I've come to love you, and I've come to enjoy our time together, but guess what? We have only just begun. So these words are taken from Robin Wall Kimmerer from Braiding Sweetgrass. We need acts of restoration, not only for polluted waters and degraded lands, but also for our relationship to the world. We need to restore honor to the way we live, so that when we walk through the world, we don't have to avert our eyes with shame, so that we can hold our heads up high and receive the respectful acknowledgement of the rest of Earth's beings. May this service remind us and inspire us on our path of restoration to the world, of nature, and of humanity.
If you have a chalice at home, I invite you to join us by lighting it. Awaken to the Work by Reverend Suzelle Lynch. The fire of love burning deep in every human heart calls us to awaken. Awaken to the work of justice. Awaken to the work of compassion. Awaken to the work of community. For in this time of human suffering and exaltation, we are called beyond awakening into action. May the chalice flame we now light guide our hearts in service to a greater good that holds all living beings in its holy embrace. Please join me in singing hymn number 44. We sing of golden mornings, and please enjoy your breath as I make the transition from worship associate to singer.
We sing of golden mornings, we sing of sparkling seas, of prairies, valleys, mountains, and stately forest trees. We sing of flashing sunshine and life-bestowing rain, of birds among the branches, and springtime come again. We sing the heart courageous, the youthful eager mind. We sing of hopes undaunted, of friendly ways and kind. We sing the roses waiting beneath the deep piled snows,
I'm back. Please join me in affirming our mission. First Unitarian Church of Wilmington is a beloved community that nourishes minds and spirits, fights injustice, and transforms the world through loving action.
So today we are remembering Juneteenth, and I have adapted these words from our fellow Delawarean citizen, Joseph Biden Jr., who writes, "Nearly 9 decades after our nation's founding, and more than 2 years after President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, enslaved Americans in Galveston, Texas, finally received word that they were free from bondage. As those who were formerly enslaved were recognized for the first time as citizens, Black Americans came to commemorate Juneteenth with celebrations across the country, building new lives and a new tradition that we honor today. Juneteenth is a day of profound weight and power, a day in which we remember the moral stain and terrible toll of slavery on our country, what I have long called America's original sin, a long legacy of systemic racism, inequality, and inhumanity. But it is a day that also reminds us of our incredible capacity to heal, to hope, and to emerge from our darkest moments with purpose and resolve. On Juneteenth, we recommit ourselves to the work of equity, equality, and justice, and we celebrate the centuries of struggle, courage, and hope that have brought us to this time. There is still more work to do. Psalm 30 proclaims that weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. Juneteenth marks both the long, hard night of slavery and discrimination and the promise of a brighter morning to come. So on this day, on this Juneteenth 2022, may we recommit ourselves to the longings that have been held in the hearts and souls of many across many generations. May we commit ourselves to the work of equity, equality, and justice. Let us join together in a time of prayerful meditation. Spirit of life and love, known by many names and no name at all, We humble ourselves as we recognize that we have not yet overcome. We are reminded that in our heart of hearts, that we long for the day where this world can become a place where justice shall roll down like rivers and mercy like a mighty stream. Each day, however, sadly, we are reminded that we're not there yet. Too often, we see reminders. Too often, we experience racial injustice and all the various ways that that plays out around us and within us. Too often, we recognize that the transgenerational pain of enslavement still has its impact on who we are as a country, still has its impact on those who have carried most of that burden. May we find a path forward. May we find a way to overcome. May indeed we recognize the tension between where we are and where we could be. May we recommit ourselves this day with all the power of spirit and love and compassion and justice within us and among us, so that indeed one day we shall overcome. So may it be. Amen. Each week we take a time in our service to attend to the concerns that we're holding in our own heart. And so that we need not hold any of those concerns alone, we take a time to name those concerns in this company or on the chat. And so, following this shared silence, I'll invite you, if you would like, to name a concern for a person or for concern in the world aloud or write it in chat. But let's begin first by attending to our heart so that we can then attend to our common heart and what it is that we're holding this morning. So let's gather together first in a shared silence. So what names would you like to speak aloud in this room? What concerns would you like to hold up in this gathering this morning or on the chat? May all the names that were spoken and those unspoken find peace and healing this day.
Our reading is from Malcolm Clemens Young, The Spiritual Journey of Henry David Thoreau. At first, Henry David Thoreau's love of nature may not seem like a religious passion. In the books he published during his lifetime, Thoreau faults Christian leaders for being too timid to speak out about political injustices, such as slavery. He believed Christians are wrong to claim any kind of superiority over others or to assert that God in any sense prefers them. Thoreau also rejected the idea that the Bible is the only form of inspired literature. Thoreau does not agree with the Christian doctrine that sinfulness and atonement should be at the center of religious life. It does not take much scrutiny to see the importance of religious ideas for Thoreau, or to put this more precisely, that he longed for intimacy or communion with the force that he believed brought forth all nature. This almost mystical fascination with God, along with his sincere conviction that we come nearest to God in nature, led to his deep academic interests in world religions. Mostly, though, this strongly held belief provoked him to totally structure his life around nature. Thoreau did not write religious treatises. He tried to live in a way that would draw himself more closely into the divine.
So, as that reading indicates, Henry David Thoreau cleared a path for himself in life. That path took him beyond some of the dominant conventional thinking, both in religion and in society, that were prevalent in his time. He was raised in New England, that New England atmosphere of the mid-19th century when Calvinists and Unitarians and Transcendentalists, who were the children of Unitarians or even Unitarian ministers, were duking it out. They were duking it out about the nature of humanity and of the divine and the sources of revelation and of truth. Thoreau concluded that if God were to be found at all, it would be not after death, but here and now, and most probably in nature. He felt that the divine dwelt within, rather than in an extraterrestrial paradise, and could only be found there. In his journal, he wrote, "Heaven is the inmost place. What sacred place can there be but the innermost part of my own being?" So Thoreau, in contrast with some of the dominant religious perspective of his time in New England, particularly the Calvinist perspective, had what we might call a worldly spirituality that urges us to focus our attention on the here and now, on the ongoing revelations of the divine in nature and our own reflections on our own life. Attending to our inner life and the ongoing revelations in the here and now could involve, as it did for many transcendentalists, writing, journaling, composing poetry, or sauntering in nature. I love that word, sauntering. Why don't we all say it together? Sauntering. Let's practice that this summer, sauntering in nature. So this familiar quote from Thoreau captures, I suspect, the prime motive of his life. And maybe it can say something to us this morning as we hear these familiar words. He wrote, "I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not turn what it had to teach and not when I came to, I could learn what it had to teach, and not when I came to die discover I had not lived. I did not wish to live what was not life, living is so dear. Nor did I wish to practice resignation unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deep and to suck out all the marrow of life. Do you resonate with those words at all? What I particularly appreciate about Thoreau's mystical sensitivity and reflections is that it was not merely self-absorption. He also engaged directly with the social concerns of his time. Thoreau denounced the church of his time as much as government and institutions because of what he sensed was their complicity in waging immoral wars, forcibly relocating Native Americans, and by supporting slavery. He could not simply conform with what he felt to be against his own conscience. And like many transcendentalists, he believed there is a higher law grounded in conscience that takes precedence over civil law. He wrote in an essay, "Let your life be a counter friction to stop the machine." This essay was published after his death with the title of his well-known and influential book, Civil Disobedience. It intrigues me that the same author who wrote about his retreat to nature in his book Walden also wrote about his engagement with and response to social issues in his book Civil Disobedience. The same writer who retreated to the woods also was directly involved in the abolitionist movement and in conscientious objection to war. Thoreau's was a worldly spirituality, what today we would call an engaged spirituality. Indeed, I believe that his life demonstrates that there ought to be no hard divisions between the spiritual and the political, between the practical life and philosophy, between action and contemplation. Thoreau is perhaps a complicated person because he defies some of our usual tendency towards categorizing. Indeed, I believe it is his integral mindset that makes him a potential spiritual guide for the 21st century. He is someone who can speak directly to people like us, who often create divisions where in reality there is none. Too often today we abide on one side of a supposed dichotomy or another. We may say that we are spiritual, or we may say we are not spiritual. We may say that we are committed to social justice, or we may say that we are committed to personal growth. We may say that we are guided by the rational, or we may say that we are inspired by wonder. We could oftentimes tend to create camps with, of course, our side of the imagined dichotomy always held as superior to the other side of the imagined dichotomy. Do you get what I'm saying here? Okay. Yet, my friends, we live in a time where the challenges facing us require us to not to continue to gather in separate camps, but around the same campfire. I like how one of our worship associates, Ed Scott, often invites us to bring our whole self to worship. Indeed, we need to continually practice bringing our whole selves, not just parts of ourselves, to our lives and to the social challenges that we face and to one another when we gather in various ways as a congregation. In order to really show up in ways that are going to make a difference at a time of increased gun violence, of climate crisis, of racial injustice, of economic inequality, and the erosion of meaning, our whole selves Our whole selves need to be engaged, and we need to think in integral and holistic ways. Let's face it. We can't just think our way through these issues that I've named. We can't just do isolated actions without also doing the inner work that accompanies them. We can't pretend that the solutions are only rational when we know that they're also emotional and moral. We can't imagine that if we get our own individual stuff together, that alone will dissolve the large systemic issues that keep what is intact. We may need to re-examine some of our own fixed assumptions, I believe, if we're going to be a transformative force in our time. Now, I've observed that sometimes, as Unitarian Universalists, we have this underlying attitude that if only people will grow up, which we tend to mean let go of their prior beliefs, dispense of myths or conventional religious ideas or language, if only people would be as disbelieving or presumably as intelligent or rational as we say we are, then all would be well, or at least maybe get a little better. But I think it's becoming increasingly clear that growing up in the ways that I've just described is insufficient in and of itself. As Unitarian Universalists, we are perhaps experiencing a generational shift, if not a cosmic one, in which we realize that as important as growing up is, we need more waking up as well. We can't simply mark our progress of growing up by what we no longer believe. All of us, across all religious and political spectra, need to wake up as well. The kinds of complex social issues, the kind of complicated questions of meaning and ethics that we're confronted with now are nudging us to wake up. By waking up, I mean a shift of consciousness, a more integral mindset that allows us to understand the connections, the interconnection between the spiritual and the political, the personal and the cultural, activism and contemplation, and between the natural world and the human world. Thoreau is one of those persons who I believe had such awakening that allowed him to act from this integral mindset. It wasn't until I read more about Thoreau's actual life, however, that I realized that he was more than a philosopher, more than a writer or lover of nature or an advocate of civil disobedience. Indeed, his time at Walden was preceded by significant transformative events that not only changed his life, but I believe also shifted his consciousness. He not only grew up through these experiences that I'll talk about in a moment, I believe he also woke up. We know that sometimes it is painful experiences, deep experiences of loss that provoke this shift in consciousness in us. And it was certainly the case for Thoreau. The pivotal event for Thoreau was the untimely death from tetanus of his brother John in January 1842. Henry was close to his brother John. They took boat trips together, as recorded in one of Henry's books, and they started a school together. They were companions in work and in spirit. And then, soon after John's death, Ralph Waldo Emerson's 5-year-old son, who Henry had tutored, also died. These were devastating events. They impacted Henry. First, he didn't react at all. And then, as one author puts it, at first he was actually repressing powerful emotions. He began to sink into a listlessness and depression. And 11 days later, he too began to exhibit the symptoms of tetanus, of lockjaw, though he had not, in fact, actually contracted the disease. The writer continues, Thoreau's symptoms became so severe that his doctors and family were concerned that he would die, and even after he began to recover, he remained bedridden for a month and was seriously weakened until the spring. I think it was during that time that his consciousness started to shift. Thoreau, in his grief, turned to poetry, seeking to find ways to express himself and to engage more directly with life. And his poetry particularly turned him toward nature in some new ways. Nature as a healer, and a revealer to him both of the fragility of life and the presence of this worldly divine revelations. And so it is for many of us. Poetry becomes part of our healing process. And sometimes in our poetry, we make sense of the ever-present wisdom and power of nature as a source of truth, solace, or revelation. I have experienced over this past year this subtle power in our class, our ongoing class, the poetry as a tool of wellness, in which some of us have gathered regularly and some of us sporadically, either in person or online. A regular attender of that group in the last few months is Lisa. I'm going to invite Lisa to read one of her poems that she composed in that group, a poem entitled Alone. But before she reads the poem, she's agreed to tell us some of the background that led to this poem. So Lisa, when you are ready. And you could take your mask off, yeah.
Our journey to become parents has not been a smooth one. We experienced 8 miscarriages and then turned to IVF to treat a genetic component of our repeated pregnancy loss. After 2 rounds of scientifically driven embryo creation, we finally had a healthy embryo that we hoped someday would be our daughter that we had dreamed of for so long. Lily was born at full gestation last December after a healthy pregnancy, but then she passed away 3 days later due to severe hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy after enduring birth trauma. On the day that we knew Lily would leave us, I felt lost. I couldn't turn to a prescribed dogma for comfort and needed to forge my own path of personal growth. Much of this comfort came, as it had for Thoreau, through nature. Long walks on the beach before the sun rose and the moon kissed the still ocean. Quiet solitude in the nature reserve where palm trees envelop you, and it is just as easy to get lost through the trails as your thoughts. Here in the Brandywine region, I'm awake in the mountains of Delaware, otherwise known as Brandywine Creek State Park. I hike up the mountain, cross the stream, scramble down the slippery rocks in a repetitive motion, day in and out, as if conquering the mountain. Okay, yeah, it's a hill. I grew up at the beach. Could fix something that has broken deep inside of me. Spending time on my special path has given me a chance to pause at the sprouts that grow from underneath the rock, or the life, the entire ecosystem that exists in a decaying tree trunk. As nature is a place of healing, creating poetry and art with others is a connection. I began longing for an opportunity to connect with others, and I finally felt ready to begin writing again, something that had felt lost to me when my being was scraped, like a wire brush after Lily's death. So now my poem, Alone. You do not have to be alone. You do not have to hide underneath heavy blankets and weighted thoughts when you find yourself in this place between a nightmare and a miracle. Tell me how the wound remains after you tear away the scab. Poke at a fleshy gash. Try to expose your gentle self to a harsh world. We'll go slowly together over the mountains every day, where these trees were also cut down in the first breath of life. But decay brings rebirth, and the deciduous leaves form endless caverns. That's where hope lives. And creeks receive weary and ancient hills. Wounds will scab over. Erosion will deaden the scars. But balance exists in an endless cyclic dance to which you are invited, and you are not alone.
Thank you, Lisa. Not only for this sharing with us today, but also for the ways that you've engaged our poetry group to feel alongside of you these last few months. The story of loss that you have told created a bond between us, and so I hope you have not felt alone. Your poetry, and this is only one of a series that you have offered to us, gives expression to a growing strength in your own soul, but also the power of nature to urge us on our healing path. So I accepted your invitation to share in this larger group today because I immediately saw the connection between what I had been studying in Thoreau's life following his tragic losses and what you were also doing in your poetry. Thoreau first turned to poetry because it allowed him to be with his grief with a poetic sensibility and acceptance rather than the all too common instrumental or fix-it mentality. Your lines about the tree convey some of the ever-present wisdom of nature. If we can open ourselves to it, that ever-presence of nature that can speak to us even in times of loss. You write, where these trees were also cut down in the first breath of life, but decay brings rebirth, and deciduous leaves form endless caverns. That's where hope lives. These verses and the other verses in your poem remind me so directly of how Thoreau also discovered this ever-present wisdom in nature and its particular power of healing. Thoreau's poem, The Fall of the Leaf, is too long for me to share with you today. But Thoreau thought of the seasons of a tree's leaves as similar to the cycles in life itself, the cycles that we all go through in life that are inherent in nature's way, and that you refer to, Lisa, as the cyclic dance. Thoreau declared that the human needs not only to be spiritualized, but naturalized on the soil of the earth. Something shifted in Henry David Thoreau, and he emerged from his traumatic losses eventually more determined to live a deliberate life. He was an early transcendentalist and a naturalist, and it may appear to us that he was romantic about nature, romantic about his experiences in nature, but he also was a scientist when it came to understanding nature. He was a spiritual person, enjoying solitude and contemplation, spiritual journaling, and reading of Eastern scriptures, especially the Bhagavad Gita. And he was also a social activist and a protester, seeking to change not only just himself, but the civilization that he was a part of. He plunged the depths of his own inner life, and he also provided shelter and passage to those on the Underground Railroad, to those seeking escape from slavery. And so he lived in these dynamic tensions, and he did not try to prematurely resolve them. Instead, he ventured into a deeper place of contradiction and integration that is actually the birthright of all of us. Thoreau not only intimately engaged with nature, he sought to perceive the world in a new way. In his book, The Spiritual Journey of Henry David Thoreau, Malcolm Clemens Young explores the perspectives and the practices that Thoreau embodied in his everyday life. We know that he kept a journal from age 20 until his death, 14 volumes. We know he took regular walks in nature, or what he called the wild. We know that for Thoreau that these were spiritual practices because he was open to an understanding that nature can disclose to him something of the divine. I commend all of these same practices to us as we move towards and within these summer days, to take some practical steps, like keeping a journal, to capture your own reflections, jotting down a verse or a poem that emerges within you as you saunter. Let's say that word again, saunter. Say it again, saunter in nature. I think the word itself tells you how to do it. Okay. He took all of these as disciplines, and maybe they can be disciplines for us. And so, nature for him was akin to the scriptures and conventional religion that people studied to understand God. But Thoreau wrote, "My profession is to be always on the alert, to find God in nature, to know God's lurking places, to attend to all the oratorios and the operas in nature." So may we. So may we find those oratorios, those operas in nature that are always, always there if only we open ourselves to attend to them. If only we can remove those things that separate us from our pure experience of nature's wonder and glory and wisdom. I close with these words by Thoreau, which I believe provide wisdom for us this day and the days before us. We must learn to reawaken and keep ourselves awake by an infinite expectation of the dawn, which does not forsake us in even our soundest sleep. So may it be. Amen.
This is the time in our service when we ask for your financial support for the work of our church, to keep our programs running, the staff supported, and the lights and the air conditioning on. You'll see the 4 ways you can contribute on the side of your screen. You only need to pick one. If you are in the sanctuary, you can place a check or cash in the box at the back. You can mail a check to the Halstead Street address. You can log onto the church website and find your way to the donate page. Or you can use the Vanco mobile faith engagement app and follow the prompts. We will be grateful for whatever you are able to contribute. Please join me in dedicating our offering. To the work of this congregation, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives and these our offerings. Activate singer mode. Many of you know this song, and I will not stop you from singing along.
Oh, below me I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean. Still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun might sail and moon my rudder as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all you kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on, greet the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
If you have lit a chalice at home, please join me in extinguishing it as I read these words. May it stay with you, by Reverend Scott Taylor. May it stay with you, this awakening, this beautiful grasp of who you truly are, never alone, always worthy, graced with a unique gift that the world surely needs. And if you lose it, if it slips through your busy fingers or is drowned out by the noise of the world, remember you can always retrieve it here in this tender temple of equally forgetful friends who are always ready to sing you back to yourself. Amen. Finally, please join me in singing our closing hymn, number 312, Here on the Paths of Every Day.
Here on the paths of every day, here on the common human way, is all the stuff the gods would take to build a heaven, to mold and make new Edens. Ours the task sublime, to build eternity. We need no other stones to build the temple of the unfulfilled, no other ivory for the doors, no other marble for the floors, no other cedar for the beam and dome of our immortal dream. Amen.